Have you ever met someone who changed your life by falling out of the sky? This is the story of a single father raising his daughter in a quiet mountain town, and the mysterious woman who crash-landed into their lives during a winter storm. She carried nothing but a broken plane, a haunted past, and a heart she swore she'd never open again. But sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness to rewrite everything. And sometimes the place you crash is exactly where you were meant to land. Before we dive into this heartwarming story of love, second chances, and the power of coming home, make sure to subscribe if you enjoy emotional, inspiring stories that touch the heart and lift the soul. Hit that bell so you never miss a chapter. Now, let's begin. Struggling single dad took in a lost pilot. During a storm, she gave his daughter a family and wings. The storm rolled in like a memory, slow at first, then all at once. Tyler Jacobs stood on the back porch of his modest house, one hand resting on the weather-worn railing, the other clutching a chipped ceramic mug that still radiated the faint warmth of black coffee. The wind had changed direction, sharp, wet, and urgent, like it was trying to tell him something. He didn't need the local forecast to know what was coming. He'd lived in Haven Ridge long enough to read the sky like scripture. The clouds hung low and heavy, dense with snow that hadn't yet fallen. The kind of night where time seemed to slow down, and hearts remembered what they'd lost. From the living room came the sound of a soft giggle. Ava, he turned, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. His daughter, 6, fiercely curious, and the reason he remembered to breathe each morning, sat cross-legged in front of the fireplace, building a cardboard control tower for the model airport they'd been working on all week. "You think planes fly in weather like this, Daddy?" she asked, looking up with wide hazel eyes. He took a breath, letting her innocence fill the hollowness that winter tended to carve into him. "Not smart ones," he said, walking in and ruffling her chestnut curls. "Storms like this? Best place to be is home. Unless someone's lost," she added softly. Tyler paused. The way she said it, quiet, almost to herself, gave him pause. But before he could respond, the power blinked once, then died with a groan. Everything went black. Ava squeaked in surprise, and Tyler reached for the flashlight he always kept under the side table. He flicked it on and cast a gentle beam across the room. The glow danced over the model planes, the bookshelf, the quilt his late wife stitched before the cancer stole her voice. "It's just the storm," he said calmly. "We'll light a few candles, build a pillow for it, and ride it out like adventurers." But before he could move, a low, thunderous boom echoed in the distance, followed by a sound that didn't belong in the mountain silence. A whine, mechanical, sudden, then silence again. Ava looked up at him, her small hand reaching for his. "Was that thunder?" Tyler's eyes narrowed. That wasn't thunder. He grabbed his coat, pulling it over his flannel shirt, and grabbed the old military-grade flashlight from the hallway. "Stay inside. I'll be right back." "Daddy!" Ava started, but he was already at the door. Outside, the snow had started, light, sharp flakes blowing sideways in the wind. He scanned the sky, then the horizon beyond the tree line. And then he saw it. About a quarter-mile out, past the edge of his property, just before the thick line of pines, an eerie orange flicker. Something was burning. His boots crunched through snow and dead leaves as he jogged across the field. Flashlight beam bouncing ahead of him. The wind howled louder now, pressing against him like a warning. But Tyler had lived through loss, real loss. Fear didn't stop him anymore. As he got closer, the scene became clear. A small aircraft, private, high-end, badly mangled, had crash-landed in the open field. One wing was snapped clean off. The tail had gouged a trench into the earth. Smoke rose from the engine, but there was no visible fire. He didn't see movement. He approached cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Anyone inside?" No response. Then, movement. The door creaked open, and a figure slumped forward. Tyler surged into action. Climbing the wreckage, he reached inside and gently pulled the pilot into his arms. She was unconscious, bleeding from a cut above her eyebrow, her flight suit damp with cold. She wasn't old. Late 30s, maybe. Strong jawline, hair pulled back tight, even in crisis. But her hands, and they trembled. Not from the cold, from something deeper. "Hey," he said gently, cradling her weight. "I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open just as he was lifting her down the steps. "Where?" she mumbled, barely audible. "Where am I?" "Somewhere safe," he said. "Let's get you warm." She closed her eyes again. By the time he reached the porch, Ava had opened the door, blanket in hand, eyes wide with silent worry. Tyler carried the woman inside, laying her gently on the couch. The flickering fireplace painted her pale face with gold. "Daddy, is she an angel?" Ava whispered. Tyler looked at the woman, at the bruises forming on her cheek, at the deep lines of exhaustion that marked her features. And something in him shifted. "No," he said quietly, "but she fell from the sky all the same." The scent of cedarwood and old books greeted Claire Halston as she blinked her eyes open, though her surroundings were still blurred. For a moment, the world tilted sideways, a cruel reminder of what had come before. The storm, the failing engine, the field rushing up too fast. She tried to sit up and winced as pain flared through her left shoulder. "You might want to take it slow." The voice came from a few feet away, calm and solid. She turned her head carefully and saw a man, early 40s maybe, seated in a worn leather armchair by the fire. He had the kind of face that looked like it had weathered its fair share of storms. Rugged, quiet, enduring. There was kindness in his eyes, though. Not pity. That mattered more than she expected. "Where," she rasped, "am I?" "You're in Haven Ridge, small town, northern Rockies, and in my living room, technically." She blinked again. Her lips were dry, her throat parched. She scanned the space. A humble but well-kept home. Pine floorboards, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with children's books and old aviation manuals. There was a model airplane on the mantel, painted sky blue. She looked down at herself. Someone had wrapped her in a thick quilt. Her flight suit was unzipped halfway, gauze taped gently across her brow. The man stood, crossed to her with a slow, measured stride, and handed her a mug of warm tea. "I'm Tyler," he said. "Tyler Jacobs. And you crash-landed about 100 yards from my backyard, in the middle of a blizzard. Impressive aim." Claire took the mug but didn't drink. "How long was I out?" "Couple of hours. You were hypothermic. That gash on your forehead probably earned you a few stitches if we had a doctor in town. But we make do." As if on cue, small footsteps approached. A little girl with a mess of curls peeked from behind the hallway corner. Claire blinked again. The same child from earlier, or maybe a dream. Her eyes were large, curious, and full of something Claire hadn't seen in years. Trust. "Hi," the girl said quietly. "I'm Ava. I'm 6.5. Claire nodded stiffly. "Hi, Ava." "You fell from the sky," Ava added matter-of-factly. "Daddy said your plane looked like a silver bird." Tyler chuckled under his breath and gave Ava a gentle nudge. "Why don't you go draw her a welcome picture?" "Okay." "He washamina," the girl chirped, skipping off down the hallway with a purpose. Claire turned her gaze back to Tyler. "She's yours?" "Yeah, it's just us." She didn't ask about the mother. She'd seen the lone coffee mug, the childlike order of the home. She knew better than to pry. "I'll leave by morning," she said quietly, setting the mug down. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "You can't be serious." "I've got people waiting, things to take care of." "You can barely lift your arm." "I'll manage." Tyler exhaled, sitting again. "Look, I don't know what's waiting for you out there, but right now there's a level 3 storm warning and 0 visibility. Your radio's toast, the nearest flight mechanic is 2 towns over, and this place doesn't exactly have Uber service." Claire didn't respond. She looked at the fire, the way its light danced on the brickwork. It was too quiet here, too still. It unsettled her more than the crash. "You're used to running," Tyler said softly. Her head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" "I've seen that look before," he continued, not unkindly. "In the mirror, after my wife died. For a while, all I knew how to do was keep moving. Then Ava came along and suddenly I had to stop, had to learn how to stay." Claire's jaw tightened. She didn't come here for this. She hadn't come anywhere, actually. The storm had made that decision for her, and now she was stuck in a stranger's house with a kid and a man who spoke too honestly. "I didn't ask for help," she muttered. "No," Tyler said simply. But that doesn't mean you don't need it. There was a silence then, deep and unbroken, save for the low hiss of snow against the windows. Claire stared into the fire, mind flashing to what she'd left behind. The scandal, the headlines, the betrayal of someone she once trusted with her life. Her world had come apart at 30,000 feet, and she was still falling. But here in this simple room, things felt grounded. Not easy, not safe, but real. A few minutes passed. "You fly much?" she asked, glancing toward the model planes. "Used to, before Ava. Worked maintenance for a regional airline. Never got certified myself." She nodded, half listening. Her body ached, her mind ran in loops, and yet she didn't want to close her eyes again. Because when she did, she dreamed of spinning. Ava returned then, beaming, holding up a drawing. "Look, I made you in the sky, but with wings like a real angel." Claire stared at it. There she was, stick figure and all, with giant purple wings and a smile. Something cracked in her chest. Not a break, a softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter now. "It's beautiful." "You can keep it," Ava offered. "It'll make you feel better." Claire looked at Tyler, whose face betrayed no judgment, only something that looked a lot like understanding. For the first time in a long while, Claire Halston didn't feel like she was falling anymore. Just floating, and maybe, just maybe, beginning to land. The snow hadn't let up by morning. If anything, it had thickened into a quiet, blinding curtain outside the windows, wrapping Haven Ridge in a hush that seemed to stretch time itself. Claire stood at the kitchen window, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. Tyler had insisted she stay another day, citing the forecast and her condition. She hadn't argued, not because she agreed, she never let herself rely on anyone, but because something in her had simply let go. The quiet, the crackling fire, the low hum of the radio playing Ella Fitzgerald. It all dulled the edges of her usually razor-sharp awareness. Behind her, Ava chattered to herself as she pieced together another model plane. The living room had been converted into a miniature hangar. Papers, glue, and plastic wings strewn across the floor. Tyler, back from clearing snow from the porch, shook out his jacket and gave Claire a half smile as he passed. "You like your coffee strong, I take it?" he asked. "I like it honest," she replied, sipping without sugar. "Strong usually gets there quicker." He nodded, then leaned over to check on Ava, gently adjusting the wings of her model. Claire watched, quietly struck by the tenderness in his movements. It wasn't rehearsed or performative. It was real. A man who had learned to move slowly, intentionally, for the sake of someone smaller. Ava looked up. "Can Claire help me pick the paint colors?" Claire hesitated. "You sure? I've been told I have terrible taste." Ava giggled. "That's okay. I do too." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Now that's what I call teamwork." Claire sat down beside Ava, and the girl immediately pushed the tiny plane toward her, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "This one's special," she said. "It's going to be the one that flies to see Mommy." Claire's hand paused mid-reach. "Your mom?" she asked softly. Ava nodded. "She's in the sky. Daddy says she watches from there. So I'm building a plane that can go real high. Maybe she'll see it and wave." The words hit Claire with a strange mix of warmth and ache. Children had a way of saying things that knocked the wind out of you. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true in a way adults had long forgotten how to be. "She would love that," Claire said quietly. Ava smiled. "Did you ever fly to see someone you missed?" Claire's hand trembled slightly as she held the plastic tail of the model. "No," she whispered, "but I used to fly to feel like I could outrun them." Ava didn't understand, but she nodded anyway, satisfied. Tyler from the kitchen had heard. His movement slowed, but he didn't interrupt. Claire cleared her throat, trying to fold the ache back into its compartment. But Ava, unbothered by adult discomfort, pressed on. "Did you always want to fly?" "Yes," Claire said after a moment. "Always. My father was a pilot. He used to take me to the airfield when I was little. We'd lie on the hood of his truck and watch the takeoffs, like they were magic." "Sounds like fun," Ava said dreamily. Claire smiled faintly. "It was. Back then, flying meant freedom, being above it all. No pain, no mess. Just sky." "But then you came down," Ava said almost sadly. Claire looked at her, eyes suddenly glassy. Yeah, she said. I did. Tyler brought over 2 mugs, one for himself and another for Claire. He sat across from her at the dining table, letting Ava return to her painting with a soft hum of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You okay? He asked gently. Claire didn't look at him. She asked if I ever flew to see someone I missed. And did you? Claire swallowed hard. I had a daughter once. Tyler's expression didn't change. He waited, unhurried. She came too early, Claire said, voice low. And I was too scared, too selfish. I told myself I wasn't ready to be a mother, that I had a career, a life to live. So I signed the papers, closed the door. She clenched her jaw. I told myself I was doing what was best, that someone else could give her more. But years passed and I stopped flying for joy. I flew to forget, and that never worked. Tyler sat back, his hand resting lightly on the edge of his mug. Does she know? Claire shook her head. She was adopted. I never went back, never wanted to open that wound, until recently when everything else in my life started to unravel. The media, the headlines, the career I built on keeping control, it all collapsed. Tyler's eyes searched hers. And now? Claire glanced toward Ava, who was humming off key and dabbing yellow paint on a wing. Now I don't know what I'm doing, but when your daughter handed me that picture, something cracked. There was a long pause. You know, Tyler said slowly, sometimes we crash because we're headed somewhere we weren't meant to land. Doesn't mean the sky was wrong, just means the ground needed us more. Claire let out a dry laugh, 1 part breath, 2 parts sorrow. You always talk like that? No, he said, eyes soft. Only when someone looks like they haven't been told the truth in a long time. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not a man trying to fix her, but one simply willing to stay in the wreckage. It was disarming, and maybe that's why she didn't pull away when Ava climbed into her lap, resting her head gently against Claire's chest. The little girl whispered, You can be our co-pilot if you want, just for a while. Claire didn't answer, but her arms tightened around the child in a way that said she just might. Claire Halston had spent the better part of her adult life moving too fast to notice anything ordinary. Schedules, checklists, departure times. Her days had been ruled by precision. If something didn't serve a purpose, she passed it by. But here in Tyler's quiet home nestled in the snow-drifted edges of Haven Ridge, life slowed into a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Mornings started with the hiss of coffee on the stove, Ava's sleepy voice echoing from her room, and the soft shuffle of Tyler's boots as he carried in firewood. The radio played old country tunes or Sinatra on vinyl. The scent of maple syrup and toast often drifted through the air. Nothing about it was grand, but somehow it made her chest ache. That morning, Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of Tyler's oversized flannel shirts over leggings. She didn't remember when she'd stopped wearing her own clothes. They were still folded neatly in her duffel by the door, ready for departure. And yet, she hadn't moved them. Tyler was sitting at the table, working on a small engine part that belonged to Ava's broken toy helicopter. Ava, meanwhile, was scribbling something furiously with crayons. "What you drawing today, Ace?" Tyler asked without looking up. Ava beamed. "A house with wings, so it can fly with us and never be left behind." Claire blinked. There it was again. That effortless way the girl had of saying something that somehow found the weakest spot in her armor and tapped ever so gently. She poured 3 mugs of hot chocolate, adding extra marshmallows to Ava's without asking. As she set them down, Tyler gave her a quiet nod of thanks. They didn't need many words, she'd learned. Silence between them was never heavy, just companionable. "I'm going to build this one for real," Ava declared, holding up her latest creation. "And when Mommy sees it, she'll know I'm okay." Claire sat beside her. "You think she can see you?" Ava didn't hesitate. "Of course. She lives in the clouds now." Claire glanced at Tyler, whose expression had softened into something distant but affectionate. It was the look of someone who still lived with ghosts but had made peace with their presence. "She was a school teacher," he said quietly. "Brightest woman I've ever known. Loved books and airplanes and the smell of rain. Took Ava to the airstrip every Saturday, even when she was sick." Claire saw the emotion flicker behind his eyes and looked away. sensing it wasn't a story he told often, maybe not even aloud. She passed 3 years ago, he added. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed late. Claire felt her chest tighten. I'm sorry, she said. Tyler offered a small smile. So was I. For a long time. But Ava, she made sure I didn't drown in it. Kids have a strange way of keeping you breathing. Claire nodded, then sipped her cocoa. It was too sweet, but she didn't mind. Somehow it suited the moment. After breakfast, the snow lightened enough for them to venture outside. Tyler pulled the old sled from the barn, and Ava squealed with delight. They spent the morning sliding down the hill behind the house. Claire hesitated at first, awkward in borrowed boots and gloves too big for her hands. But Ava insisted she try, and Tyler's smirk only dared her further. When she finally gave in and launched herself down the hill, her scream turned into laughter halfway down. A raw, unpolished sound, one she hadn't heard from herself in years. Ava clapped at the bottom. You're a natural. Claire collapsed into the snow beside her, breathless and grinning. I think I lost a rib on that bump. Later, soaked in cold and smiling like fools, they piled back inside. Claire helped Ava out of her snow gear and hung it by the fire. Tyler handed her a towel and a knowing glance. You laugh like someone who forgot how, he said gently. She looked at him, surprised. What makes you think I forgot? He shrugged. Just a hunch. Or maybe, because I did too once. They said nothing more, but the air between them shifted, not charged exactly, but warmer, like a log added to the fire. That evening, Claire offered to cook. She found her hands clumsy with a knife, rusty from too many years of in-flight meals and hotel room service. But Tyler didn't judge, and Ava acted like her under-seasoned stew was the stuff of legends. After dinner, they sat in the living room, while Ava built yet another paper airplane fleet. Claire leaned back on the couch, her body tired in the good way, the kind that came from real living. Tyler picked up an old photo album from the shelf and offered it to her, without speaking. She flipped through the pages slowly. Snapshots of a life carved out of love and loss. There was Tyler in uniform, Ava as a baby in her mother's arms, the three of them at the lake. Claire's throat tightened. I've missed a lot, she murmured. He looked at her. We all do, but sometimes we get a second pass. Claire shut the album gently, then stared into the fire. Outside, the wind howled again, but the house held firm. This feels like home, she said, almost to herself. Tyler didn't speak. He didn't need to. The quiet agreement in his eyes said enough. And though she wouldn't admit it aloud, not yet, Claire knew something had shifted. She'd come from the sky broken, searching for nothing. But here, in this warm, ordinary place, surrounded by kindness and cardboard wings, she was beginning to wonder if this was the one flight that had truly brought her somewhere worth staying. The sky was clearer than it had been in days. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a world blanketed in white, pristine and still. Sunlight bounced off the snow, flooding the Jacobs' living room with soft morning light. But for Claire, the brightness felt more like exposure than warmth. She was packing, not frantically, deliberately, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing, even if her heart hadn't caught up. Her duffel sat half-zipped on the couch. Tyler stood by the fireplace, arms folded loosely, watching her with quiet caution. You sure about this? He asked. She nodded, avoiding his gaze. The storm's passed. The roads are clearing. I've overstayed. You were healing. I was hiding. That stopped him. Claire softened her voice. This place, you, Ava, it's been more than I ever expected. But that doesn't mean I belong. He stepped forward. Says who? Before she could answer, a knock echoed through the room. 3 sharp raps. They both turned toward the door. Claire froze. Her breath hitched. No one was supposed to know she was here. Tyler walked to the door, hesitated a beat, then opened it. A man in a sleek black coat stood on the porch, the snow around his boots already melting. He was tall, with close-cropped hair, and the distinct impatience of someone used to being obeyed. Good morning, the man said curtly. I'm looking for Claire Halston. Tyler glanced over his shoulder. Claire stood rigid, pale, lips pressed into a thin line. She's here, she said quietly, stepping forward. What do you want, Derek? The man's jaw tightened. We need to talk. In private. Tyler didn't move. Claire gave him a small nod. It's okay, she murmured. I've got this. She stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. The cold hit her like a slap, but she barely felt it. I told you not to come, she said, crossing her arms. Derek's expression hardened. You disappeared, Claire. The board is in a tailspin. Legal's been calling me nonstop. You've got shareholders threatening lawsuits. You can't just vanish. She exhaled. I wasn't vanishing. I was breathing. He scoffed. By crashing a plane and holing up with strangers in the woods? Claire's eyes narrowed. Don't reduce this to a headline. Derek stepped closer, voice low. You walked out. After everything we built. After everything No, she interrupted, voice cold. After everything you spun, the lie, the press release, the scapegoat you needed when things fell apart. His jaw twitched, but he said nothing. I'm done, she said. Let them sue. Let them speculate. I'm not going back. Derek studied her. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Something like regret. But then it was gone. You're making a mistake, he muttered, turning on his heel and disappearing down the driveway, boots crunching over the packed snow. Claire stood there for a long moment after he left, breathing, letting the cold bite her cheeks, just to feel something real. When she finally walked back inside, Tyler was waiting. Ava sat at the table, drawing again, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through their door. Tyler didn't speak. He just looked at her, steady, quiet, the same way he had when he first pulled her from the wreckage. She sat down on the couch, duffel still half-packed beside her. I should have told you who I was, she said. I figured you'd get there, he replied. Claire gave a small, hollow laugh. I wasn't just any pilot. I was the COO of Halston Aerodynamics, the face of the company. The press called me the Queen of the Sky. I built an empire on control, precision, power, and when the engine failure happened on one of our jets, they blamed the pilot. Tyler's jaw tightened. Was it his fault? No, she said. It was ours. A design flaw that got buried in a cost-cutting memo, but I was too busy protecting the brand. When it leaked, I became the story, and not the good kind. She looked down at her hands. So I left, took a test aircraft, told no one where I was going, just flew. Tyler pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, and crashed into the middle of my life. Claire looked up, surprised. That's not a complaint, he added softly, just an observation. They sat in silence for a while. Then Claire asked, Do you think less of me? Tyler shook his head. No, I think I understand you better. You didn't fall from the sky, Claire. You landed here for a reason. Claire blinked hard. Her voice dropped. What if I ruin this place too? You won't, he said, firm and gentle. You can't ruin something you didn't build. You just walked into it. And maybe gave it new meaning. Ava, unaware of the weight in the room, bounded over and held out her newest creation. A cardboard plane with the word hope scrawled across the wings. For you, she beamed, so you don't forget. Claire looked down at the crooked little plane. Her hands trembled as she took it. Thank you, she whispered. Later that night, long after Ava had fallen asleep, Claire stood by the window, staring out at the trees swaying in the moonlight. Tyler came up beside her, a blanket draped over his arm. You don't have to leave, he said softly. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until you're ready. Claire didn't answer, but when he draped the blanket over her shoulders, she didn't shrug it off. And when she finally turned away from the window, she didn't look back. The fireplace was burning low when Tyler entered the room, the flames reduced to amber whispers. Claire sat curled on the couch, wrapped in the thick blanket Ava had draped over her earlier. Her eyes tracked the flicker of shadows on the wall, but her mind was elsewhere, lost in a past that had never stopped echoing. Tyler set down 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. Couldn't sleep either. Claire didn't look at him. Do you ever stop hearing it? Hearing what? The sound of something ending. He took the chair across from her, careful not to crowd. Sometimes, he said, and sometimes I think I've moved on, only for the quiet to remind me I haven't. Claire drew a long breath. I've told you a lot about the company, the scandal, Derek. But there's one thing I haven't said. The one thing I've never said out loud. Tyler waited, letting the silence wrap around her like snow on a pine bough. Gentle, unhurried. When I was 23, she began, I got pregnant. Tyler's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. I was just out of flight school, bright-eyed, hungry for the sky. The father was another student, brilliant, reckless, and gone by the time the test turned positive. I was scared, not because of the baby, but because of what she meant, what she'd interrupt, my training, my reputation, my trajectory. She stared down at the blanket. I hid it, carried her in secret, then gave birth 6 weeks early, in a hospital 3 states away. Signed the papers the same day. No name, no contact, just gone. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I told myself it was the right thing, that she'd have a better life without me fumbling through it. I thought I could keep flying forward and never look back, but I did. Every time I flew over a city, I wondered if she was there, somewhere beneath the clouds looking up. Tyler leaned forward, his voice low. You've carried that alone? Claire nodded. The guilt followed me into every cockpit, every promotion, every article that called me a trailblazer. And when the crash scandal hit and the media turned, I didn't feel angry. I felt exposed, like someone had finally seen what I truly was. Tyler's voice was quiet. You're not a monster, Claire. No, just a coward. She stood and walked to the window, hugging the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Do you believe people like me can be forgiven? She asked, almost a whisper. Tyler was silent for a long time before answering. I think forgiveness isn't something you wait around to be given. Sometimes it's something you have to give yourself, because if you don't, the weight just keeps you flying in circles. She turned toward him. That's poetic. Do you speak in metaphors professionally? He smiled. Only after midnight. A shadow of a smile pulled at her lips, but it didn't stay. I still think about her, Claire said. What she looks like now, whether she loves books, whether she hates flying. Would you want to meet her? Claire's throat tightened. More than anything. But what if she doesn't want to meet me? Tyler stood and crossed the room. He didn't touch her, just stood near enough that his presence was felt, like the steady hum of an engine under a calm sky. If she's anything like Ava, he said softly, she'd probably just want to know that you tried. Claire turned to him then. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them was thick with everything unsaid. Fear, longing, the fragile thread of something neither of them dared name. I'm not used to people being kind when they know the truth, she said. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. That broke something open. Claire stepped forward, and for the first time, she let her forehead rest against his chest. Not a romantic embrace, not yet, but something quieter, something more essential. He didn't move, didn't tighten his arms around her, didn't press for more. He simply let her lean, let her be held by something that didn't ask for anything in return. And for Claire Halston, that was more foreign than flight itself. After a while, she pulled back, eyes red but clearer. Thank you, she said, for not fixing it. Tyler smiled. I've learned that some things aren't meant to be fixed, just carried better. They stood together at the window, looking out at the moonlight dancing across the snow. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Claire exhaled slowly. I still don't know what comes next. You don't have to, Tyler said. Maybe this is one of those times where staying still is the bravest thing you can do. Claire nodded, but her heart stirred. She wasn't ready to stay. Not forever. But for the first time in years, she wasn't desperate to leave. She looked down at the crooked paper airplane Ava had given her the day before, still sitting on the windowsill. Hope scrawled in purple crayon across its wings. She reached for it, held it in her hands. I think I want to find her, she whispered. My daughter. Tyler's eyes met hers. Then I'll help you. Claire didn't answer, but her fingers curled around the paper wings. She didn't feel like a monster, or a runaway, or even a pilot. Just a woman, finally brave enough to stop flying away. The snow had begun to melt. Drip by steady drip, the icicles surrendered to the returning sun, their softened edges catching glints of gold. The air had shifted too, lighter, less biting. It was the kind of morning that whispered, "It's time." Claire stood by the barn, brushing a fine layer of frost off the wing of her plane. The damage wasn't as bad as it had looked on impact. A miracle, really. Tyler had helped her assess the structure over the past few days, and now, with the help of some parts from town, the aircraft was finally ready. She should have felt relief. Instead, her chest ached with a weight she couldn't quite name. Tyler stepped out from the house holding a thermos and two paper-wrapped breakfast sandwiches. He crossed the yard in that unhurried way of his, like the earth would wait for him. "Morning," he said, offering her one of the sandwiches. "Bacon and egg. The usual." Claire smiled faintly and took it. "Thanks." They stood beside the plane, eating in comfortable silence, the sun rising behind the distant ridge. "You fixed her up fast," he finally said, nodding to the aircraft. "I had help," she replied, glancing at him. He looked down, thumb grazing the seam of the thermos. "So, when do you plan to take off?" "Couple of hours. Weather window opens around noon." Tyler nodded but didn't speak. Claire hated how much she wanted him to protest, to say stay, to give her a reason not to leave. But of course, he wouldn't. That wasn't his way. Instead, he said, "I packed some snacks for the flight. Ava helped. There's a note in there too. She said you'll know it when you see it." Claire's smile faltered. "Where is she?" she asked softly. "In her room. Said she was making you something." They walked back toward the house together, side by side but miles apart in their thoughts. The warmth that had once wrapped around them, all firelight and laughter and quiet healing, now seemed thinner, more fragile, like a thread stretched taut. Inside, Ava waited by the door, clutching something behind her back. Claire knelt. "Hey, Ace!" The girl looked up, eyes brighter than Claire could handle. "Daddy said you're leaving." Claire nodded, her voice tight. "I am, but not because I want to." "Then why?" Claire took a breath. "Because sometimes people have to go figure out what comes next. And I have someone I need to find." Ava considered that. "The girl from the sky?" Claire blinked. "What?" "The one you think about when you look sad. Is she your daughter?" Claire stared, stunned. "How did you—" "You talk in your sleep," Ava said simply. "Sometimes you say, 'I'm sorry' a lot." Claire looked down, overwhelmed, but Ava placed a hand on her cheek. "It's okay. I think she'll forgive you. But you should still tell her everything. Like you told me." Claire pulled the girl into a fierce hug, her chest tight with unshed tears. Ava whispered, "You can come back, right?" Claire swallowed. "If your daddy will let me." A moment later, Ava pulled back and handed her the object she'd been hiding. A small wooden keychain shaped like a house with wings, painted in shaky colors, the same image from her drawing days ago. "So you never forget where you landed," Ava said. Claire pressed it to her heart. "I won't." Tyler stood nearby, silent. Claire rose to meet his gaze. "I meant what I said," she told him, "about wanting to find her, about not wanting to run anymore." "I know," he said, "and if you find her, and there's space for someone like me on the return flight." His voice trailed off, smile rueful. Claire reached out and touched his hand, fingers warm, lingering. "There's more than space," she whispered. "But first, I have to earn it." Outside, the sky stretched wide and blue, the kind of sky that pilots dream of. Claire walked toward the aircraft, each step heavier than the last. She climbed in, ran through the pre-flight checklist, and closed the cockpit door. Tyler and Ava stood side by side in the field, watching. As the engine roared to life and the plane taxied across the snow-slick grass, Claire looked down at the keychain in her lap, the word home scrawled in uneven paint on its wing. She could barely see them as she lifted off, the father and daughter waving below. But she knew. They weren't saying goodbye. They were saying, "Come back." Claire had always loved the sound of engines. It used to soothe her. The familiar hum beneath the fuselage, the rhythmic vibration through the yoke, the climb and settle of altitude like a second heartbeat. But now flying felt different, too smooth, too quiet. The sky was flawless, cloudless, wide open. It should have been freedom. Instead, it felt like distance. She leveled the aircraft and stared out over the vast plains below, but her thoughts kept circling a small town tucked in the Rockies, and the people she'd left behind on the frozen grass. She reached into her flight bag and pulled out the bundle Tyler had packed. Inside was a cloth pouch with trail mix, a thermos of coffee wrapped in a dish towel, and a folded piece of paper in crayon. Dear Miss Claire, I hope you find your girl. Tell her she's lucky because you're the bravest person I know. Come back soon so we can build more flying houses. Love, Ava P.S. Daddy misses you. He didn't say that, but I know. Claire pressed the note against her lips. It smelled faintly of maple syrup and wood smoke. She didn't cry, but she didn't smile either. The closer she flew to her old world, the heavier everything became. 2 days later, Claire sat in her old apartment in Seattle, high above the city, staring out at the glittering skyline. Everything looked the same. Sleek furniture, glass surfaces, the untouched guest room, the awards lining the hallway like soldiers guarding memory. But she didn't belong here anymore. Not really. She tried to slip back into routine, answered a few emails, caught up on missed voicemails, most of them from reporters, a few from former board members trying to check in with carefully worded concern. She didn't return a single call. That afternoon, she took the elevator down, stepped onto the busy street, and walked 2 blocks to a quiet cafe she used to frequent. She ordered a chamomile tea and sat by the window, her laptop open in front of her. After a moment's hesitation, she typed, "How to search for a child placed for adoption. Closed records. Washington State." It felt surreal seeing it in print, like breaking a spell she had cast over her own life decades ago. A few clicks later, she was reading about registries, contact intermediaries, petition processes. It all sounded clinical, but then she found a nonprofit that specialized in reunions. Their homepage showed a woman hugging a grown daughter, both crying in the rain. Claire stared at it for a long time. Eventually, she clicked Start Your Search. The form was straightforward. Name, birth date, city, hospital. Her hands trembled over the keys. She typed her daughter's birth date, March 17th, and paused. That year felt like another life. She remembered holding her for just a moment, swaddled, silent. The nurse had hesitated when handing the baby over, as if silently asking, "Are you sure?" But Claire had already made up her mind back then. Flight over family, ambition over uncertainty. And yet here she was, 20 years later, undoing that decision one line at a time. She hit submit. The page thanked her and said someone would reach out in a few days. No fanfare, no release, just silence. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The city noise, once a comfort, now felt abrasive. Horns, sirens, elevators groaning in the walls. She stood by her floor-to-ceiling window, arms wrapped around herself, looking down at the miniature world below. She thought of Ava, probably curled up in her flannel pajamas, hugging that same paper airplane. She thought of Tyler, sipping coffee on the porch, fixing something with his hands just to keep busy. She thought of the way the house smelled when bread was in the oven, the sound of laughter during Ava's made-up games, the way Tyler's voice dipped when he said something meant only for her to hear. She left because she had to, but now that she was gone, everything felt hollow. The next morning, Claire drove out to the suburbs, to a quiet, tree-lined street where a small brick house sat behind a picket fence. She'd found the address through the adoption agency's records. It wasn't the daughter's home, just the parents'. She didn't intend to knock. She just needed to see it. She parked a block away, heart racing, hands slick with sweat. From her car, she could see the mailbox. Holland, it read. Claire's breath caught. She remembered writing that name on the forms. The family's name. They were teachers, married 15 years, couldn't have children. The agency had told her they were kind. Claire hadn't asked for more. Now the house looked warm, lived in. There was a bicycle leaned against the garage and 2 dogs napping in the yard. She watched for 20 minutes, and then the front door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-60s, with short gray hair and a soft expression. She knelt to check the mail. A moment later, a younger woman appeared, early 20s, auburn hair tied back in a bun, wearing scrubs and laughing at something on her phone. Claire's heart seized. She was beautiful. She was real. She was just there. Claire's fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She didn't get out, didn't introduce herself, didn't shatter the peace of that moment with 1,000 apologies she wasn't sure she was ready to say. Instead, she watched, memorized, etched the image into her heart, and then, slowly, she drove away. Not forever, just not yet. She had more work to do. The road into Haven Ridge felt both unfamiliar and achingly known. Claire kept both hands on the steering wheel as she turned onto the main street, her rental car humming quietly beneath her. The snow had mostly melted now, revealing muddy ditches, budding trees, and the sleepy charm of a town that didn't bother to change for anyone. She passed the diner, still advertising its Wednesday meatloaf special, and the hardware store with its faded closed Mondays sign dangling on the door. Children in knit hats kicked a soccer ball across the church lawn. Claire slowed as she passed the little library Ava had pointed to once with wide-eyed wonder. A paper cutout of a rainbow still clung to the window. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't texted or warned or hinted. She didn't know if she was being brave or foolish. Tyler's house came into view just past the ridge, sitting calm and steady in the mid-morning light. The barn stood in its familiar lean, and smoke curled from the chimney in lazy spirals. Claire pulled into the drive and turned off the engine. Her heart pounded in her throat. She stepped out slowly, letting the gravel crunch beneath her boots. Her legs felt heavier than they should have, as if every step forward came with the weight of everything she hadn't said. The porch creaked underfoot. She raised her hand, paused, then knocked. Footsteps inside, then silence. The door opened. Tyler stood there, older than she remembered, or maybe just wearier. His eyes scanned her face with a quiet calculation, but they didn't harden. They didn't close. "Hey," she said, barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Hey." A beat. Then, "You're early," he added. Claire blinked. "Early?" He stepped back and held the door open. "Ava said you'd come back. She just thought it'd be spring." Claire let out a breath, part laugh, part sob. "She's a lot smarter than me." "Yeah," he said gently. "She is." Claire stepped into the warmth of the house, and the scent hit her instantly. Cedar, cinnamon, faint traces of maple and firewood. It smelled like memory, like forgiveness. The living room was nearly the same. The model planes still lined the windowsill, the worn quilt folded on the couch, and a crayon drawing pinned to the fridge that read, "Sky House Project, Phase 2. She turned to him. "I didn't know if you'd want me back." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her, not suspiciously, but like a man checking the horizon before deciding to trust the wind. "What change?" he asked. Claire swallowed. "I saw her, my daughter, from a distance. I found her adoptive family. She looked happy, whole. She has this laugh. It reminded me of Ava." "Did you talk to her?" "No, not yet. I wasn't ready, but I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. Not really. I don't want sky-high apartments or empty meetings. I want something real, even if it's messy." He crossed his arms. "And you think you'll find that here?" "I think I already did," she said, and I walked away from it before I knew what it meant. He nodded slowly, jaw working. "You hurt Ava when you left." "I know," her voice cracked, "and I'll spend as long as it takes proving I won't do it again." Footsteps pattered down the hallway. Ava burst into view holding a toy plane, her eyes wide, like the moment was too big for her body. "Miss Claire?" Claire knelt, arms open but hesitant. "Hey, Ace." The girl didn't move at first. Her lips wobbled, her brows drew in. Then without a word, she ran across the room and slammed into Claire's arms. "You came back," she whispered into Claire's shoulder. "I did," Claire said, tears slipping down her cheek. "And I'm not leaving unless you make me." Ava pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. "Are you staying in the Sky House?" Claire laughed, breathless. "If there's still room." Tyler leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, mouth twitching at the corners. "There's room, but it's got a leaky window and you'll have to help with dishes." Claire looked up at him, something blooming in her chest. "Deal." They spent the rest of the afternoon together. Nothing dramatic, nothing scripted. Just lunch at the old wooden table, Ava talking nonstop about her new school project, Tyler fixing a drawer that had come off its tracks, and Claire washing dishes with sleeves rolled up and bare feet on the tile. As the sun dipped below the ridge and the house grew quiet, Claire stepped out onto the porch. Tyler joined her a few moments later, coffee in hand. They watched the last of the light slip behind the trees. "I wasn't sure I could be someone worth staying for," she said softly. Tyler looked at her, the way he always had, steady, unflinching. "You didn't have to be perfect," he said. "You just had to come home." She looked at him then, and in that quiet moment, the space between them felt like something whole, something earned. The stars blinked into view and Claire tilted her head back. For years, she'd believed the sky was the only place she could breathe. But tonight, with the soft creak of wood beneath her and the hum of life inside the walls, she realized something had changed. She didn't need wings anymore. She'd found her place to land. Claire stood in the middle of the community center gymnasium, holding a roll of duct tape in one hand and a bundle of string in the other, while two fourth graders argued over whether their cardboard plane needed a rudder made of glitter. "Glitter doesn't make it fly," one said indignantly. "But it makes it better," the other countered, arms crossed. Claire smiled. "Okay, engineers, let's compromise. Aerodynamic and fabulous." She crouched to help them attach the wings as Ava skipped over with her own creation. A plane made entirely from popsicle sticks, duct tape, and a suspicious number of googly eyes. "I call her Miss Skyface," Ava declared proudly. "Looks like she sees everything," Claire said, grinning. The room was filled with scattered art supplies, laughter, and the sound of scissors on cardboard. The program had been Claire's idea, a weekly model building workshop for local kids, held in the old high school gym. She'd pitched it as a way to teach creativity and teamwork, but really it had started with one quiet question from Ava over breakfast. Could we help other kids build sky houses too? Now, 3 weeks later, Claire found herself here every Saturday morning, sleeves rolled up, covered in glue and joy. And somehow, in the mess of it all, something inside her was mending. After the session ended and the last child had been picked up, Claire helped Tyler stack folding chairs. Ava was curled in the bleachers with a juice box and a clipboard, already planning next week's event. "You're good with them," Tyler said, carrying 2 chairs at once. Claire chuckled. "It's mostly bribes and googly eyes." "No," he said, pausing. "I mean, you're good with them. You listen. You lift them. It matters." She looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Thanks. I didn't think I had that in me." "You didn't give yourself the chance to find out before?" They locked eyes for a beat too long, then looked away at the same moment, both smiling faintly. Outside, the wind rustled through the budding trees. Spring was finding its way back, slowly and stubbornly. That afternoon, Claire and Ava sat on the back porch, painting the next round of wooden plane wings. Ava hummed under her breath, her legs swinging freely from the bench. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course." Ava dipped her brush in blue. "Are you my mom now?" Claire's hand stilled. "I mean," Ava went on, not looking up, "you're not my real mom, but I kind of feel like you could be." Claire looked at her, throat tightening. "Do you want me to be?" Ava shrugged. "I want you to be here. That's all." Claire swallowed the lump in her throat and reached for the girl's hand, smudged with paint. "Then I'll stay here, for as long as you'll have me." Ava smiled, satisfied, and returned to her wings. Later that night, they brought the finished planes inside, and Ava hung them from her bedroom ceiling with fishing line, transforming her room into a paper sky. Claire watched as the girl climbed onto her bed and lay beneath them, her eyes shining with wonder. "I used to dream about flying up to see my mom," Ava said softly. "Now I don't have to. I can stay down here because you came back." Claire sat beside her and brushed a curl from her forehead. "And I always will." Word spread in town faster than Claire expected. The gruff man who ran the feed store stopped her on Main Street to thank her for teaching his grandson how to make a dang decent biplane. The town librarian invited her to give a talk on the physics of flight. A retired pilot asked her to help restore his crop duster. Claire said yes to every request, not because she wanted attention, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted to belong. One day she found a folded note on her windshield, written in a child's careful scrawl. "Thank you for giving us wings. Haven Ridge, 4th grade." She kept it in her jacket pocket for days, reaching for it without thinking. And when she passed the mirror in the hallway one morning and saw her own reflection, face relaxed, eyes bright, a smear of paint across her cheek, She didn't flinch. She barely recognized the woman she'd been before. That evening, Tyler grilled dinner out back while Ava set the table with handmade paper placemats. Claire carried out a bowl of salad and caught Tyler watching her. Not staring, watching. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd find this again." "This?" she asked. Laughter in the yard, messy plates, someone humming while they sweep. Claire paused. "Do you miss her?" Tyler didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Every day, but it doesn't hurt the way it used to." She nodded, grateful for the honesty. "I don't want to replace anyone," she said. "You haven't," he replied. "You just filled the space no one else could." They stood there, the fading sun painting the world in gold. Ava poked her head out. "Dinner's ready and I made dessert. It's mostly edible." They both laughed and followed her in. That night, after Ava had gone to bed and the dishes were drying on the rack, Tyler walked Claire to the porch. She looked up at the stars. "You still fly in your dreams?" "Sometimes," he said, "but now I land too." Claire smiled. "So, what happens next?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, "We live, we stay, we build something." "And if I mess it up?" she asked quietly. Tyler looked at her, eyes steady. "Then we fix it. Together." She reached out and took his hand. Not in a dramatic way, not for show, just because it felt natural. And when they stood there side by side beneath the stars, Claire felt something shift. She had once believed she'd only ever be at home in the sky. But now she understood the truth. The wings she needed weren't made for escape. They were given so she could find her way back. The valley blushed with the color of spring. Dogwoods bloomed along the edge of the airfield, their pale pink petals fluttering with every soft gust of wind. The tall grass, once snow-covered and brittle, now rippled like a sea of green, dotted with early dandelions and clover. Claire stood by the old hangar, hands on her hips, watching as Ava sprinted across the open field with a tail of ribbons streaming behind her. The girl had insisted they test out the new kite she'd built. "For aerodynamic research," she'd said with all the seriousness of a scientist. The kite soared. Ava whooped. Claire laughed, shading her eyes to track the spinning blue triangle against the sky. "She's grown," Tyler said, coming up beside her, a bottle of lemonade in each hand. Claire took one and nodded. "In confidence, especially." He smiled. "Wonder where she gets that from." Claire gave him a playful glance. "I was thinking you." "Nah," he said. "She's got your stubborn streak." Claire accepted the compliment in silence, letting it settle. The airfield had become a ritual for them. Every Sunday afternoon since her return, they came here, not to fly, but to be near the idea of it. They cleared brush, painted trim, repaired an old windsock. Ava called it Sky House 2.0. "It still smells like motor oil and hay," Claire had said once, wrinkling her nose. "Like all the best places," Tyler replied. Today, however, something felt different. The clouds had drifted farther apart, the breeze warmer. Even the birds seemed to fly slower, more purposeful. Claire turned to Tyler, sensing it wasn't just the weather that had shifted. "You're quiet," she said. He looked at her, eyes searching, as if trying to decide whether this was the right moment or whether he'd already missed it. "I was thinking," he said finally, "about how fast things can change. One winter storm, one broken engine, one knock on the door." Claire smiled softly. "And a whole lot of duct tape." He chuckled. "Yeah, that too." Ava came running back, cheeks flushed with joy. She dropped the kite at Claire's feet and leaned into her side. "Did you see that loop-de-loop? That was a direct result of advanced stabilizer placement." Claire tousled her hair. "You're an aeronautical prodigy." Ava beamed, then ran off again to gather wildflowers. Tyler turned to Claire. "Do you remember that day you first walked through my door?" "Barely," she said, teasing. "I was bleeding and half frozen." "Yeah, and still, somehow, you looked like you didn't need a thing." Claire laughed. "I was faking it, hard." "I know," he said, "but you stayed, even when you didn't have to." She looked at him, and in his eyes she saw it. The quiet certainty, the anchored steadiness, the deep, unspoken affection that had never asked for anything in return. "You've given me a lot, Tyler," she said. I haven't given you anything you didn't already carry, he replied. I just saw it. Claire's throat tightened. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out something small. Not a ring, not a grand gesture, just a folded piece of paper, soft around the edges. He handed it to her. She opened it. It was a hand-drawn blueprint, Ava's style, in bright crayon colors, a house with airplane wings, 3 stick figures standing beneath it, a tall man, a woman with wild red hair, and a little girl between them holding both their hands. Above the roof was one word, family. Claire blinked hard. I know you're still figuring things out, Tyler said, and I know life doesn't exactly come with easy landings. But if you ever decide to build something for good, something grounded, I'd like to build it with you. Claire folded the paper carefully and held it to her chest. I already decided, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I decided the moment I stopped running, she added. The rest just took me a little while to catch up. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field. Ava skipped back with a handful of daisies and plopped them into Claire's hand. For our dinner table, she said. Claire laughed. I think the soup might taste better now. You're welcome, Ava replied, skipping ahead toward the truck. Claire turned back to Tyler. I'm not perfect, she said. You know that better than most. Perfect's not the goal, he replied. Present is. And with that, he reached for her hand. Not as a promise made under pressure, not as a grand romantic climax, but as a quiet, unmistakable invitation. Stay. Claire laced her fingers through his and gave a small nod. No words needed. They walked across the field together, toward dinner, toward a life still unfolding, toward a love that had nothing to prove and everything to offer. And above them, the last of the kite's ribbons fluttered in the wind, dancing like wings against the settling sky. The sky was wide and clear the day they said yes, not in a chapel, not beneath chandeliers or flower arches, but on the runway of the old Haven Ridge airfield where it had all begun, just a stretch of faded asphalt lined with folding chairs, wildflowers in mason jars, and a small crowd of people who'd come to witness something beautiful in its simplicity. Claire adjusted the hem of her pale blue dress and glanced toward the hangar, where Ava was twirling in a pair of sparkly flats, her curls bouncing like the ribbons tied to her wrists. A paper plane sailed past her shoulder, and she turned just in time to catch it mid-air with a triumphant grin. 23 successful landings today, she announced, holding it up like a trophy. Better than my first flight, Claire said, laughing. From the other side of the field, Tyler approached, wearing a button-down shirt and suspenders that made him look like someone out of an old photograph. He wasn't the kind of man to make a show of things, but his smile, steady, quiet, certain, said more than any vows ever could. He took her hand without a word. The officiant was the town librarian, who also ran the local poetry club. She opened with a short reading about flying and falling and finding your way home, and Claire could barely hear the words over the sound of her own heart. Not because she was nervous, but because this time there was nothing to run from, just something to walk toward. When they exchanged vows, Tyler kept it simple. You came from the sky and gave us a reason to look up again. Claire's voice trembled, but she held steady. You didn't try to fix me. You just made it safe to land. Chaco. They kissed to the sound of wind and laughter and a chorus of handmade paper planes released into the air by every child in town. Some flew straight, some spun wildly, all of them soared. After the ceremony, the celebration spilled into the old hangar, now transformed into a makeshift reception space strung with lights and lined with picnic tables. There was potluck chili, cornbread, and more pies than anyone could count. Ava insisted on introducing every guest personally, like she was hosting her own talk show. Claire moved through it all with a sense of calm she had never known in her other life. She laughed easily, hugged without reservation, and danced barefoot with Ava to a bluegrass cover of Fly Me to the Moon. At one point, she stood at the edge of the hangar, sipping lemonade and watching the evening sky shift from gold to lavender. Tyler joined her, their arms brushing. You okay? He asked. Claire nodded. Better than okay. He waited. I got a letter, she said, from the agency. Tyler straightened slightly. Your daughter? She's in college now, studying veterinary science. Her parents gave her my contact info. She hasn't reached out yet, but She knows I'm here. She knows I want to meet her. Tyler didn't say anything. He just reached over and took her hand. That's enough for now, Claire said. The door's open, and this time I won't shut it. Ava came running up, breathless. There's dancing and marshmallows and someone's goat got loose. Claire grinned. Let's go save the party. Later that night, long after the last car had driven away, and the stars blinked wide awake above them, Claire, Tyler, and Ava sat on the back steps of the airfield's office, wrapped in a shared quilt. The world was quiet in that sacred, satisfying way that comes after joy has spilled over. Ava leaned her head on Claire's shoulder. This was the best day ever. Claire kissed her curls. It really was. They sat in silence, watching fireflies drift across the field. Then Ava whispered, "We're a real family now, huh?" Tyler smiled. "We always were. But today made it official," Ava added. "Now we all have the same last name." Claire squeezed her hand. "That's just letters, sweetheart. What matters is the name we write together every day." Ava considered that, then looked up at the stars. "Do you think Mommy saw today?" Tyler's voice was gentle. "I think she sees every day." Ava nodded, satisfied. Claire stared at the sky, her thoughts drifting not to loss, but to the miracle of how far love could reach, even through storms, even through silence, even through years of distance. And in that quiet moment, something settled. Not an ending, not a finish line, just the kind of peace that says, "You're home now." In the weeks that followed, life didn't become perfect, just wonderfully real. Claire continued leading the model flight program and helped open a small aviation education center in town. Tyler restored the crop duster with help from a rotating crew of retirees, and Ava decided to write a book called The Girl Who Fell from the Sky and Forgot She Was an Angel. Claire mailed a copy of it to her daughter. She didn't expect a reply. But one morning, there was an envelope in the mailbox, simple white, with no return address. Inside was a single line written in neat, careful handwriting. "I read the book. Let's meet sometime. Maybe somewhere we can see the sky." Claire held the note to her heart, then walked inside, the sun catching the ring on her finger, Ava's drawings on the fridge, and Tyler humming in the kitchen. We hope this story touched your heart as much as it touched ours. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Are you tuning in from a quiet town like Haven Ridge or a bustling city far from the mountains? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel and tapping the notification bell so you never miss another heartfelt journey. We share stories of love, healing, and the quiet miracles of everyday kindness, and we'd love for you to be part of this growing family. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.